All right, so we're still talking about potential revenue recognition issues. So here's another one that we've got. So again, these are potential revenue recognition issues. So the next one we want to talk about, we already talked about non-refundable fees. The next one we want to chat about is what's referred to as bill and hold. All right, bill and hold transactions. So what a bill and hold transaction is an arrangement, it's in the contract where you as the company, you bill the customer for the product, but you retain physical possession of the product until it's transferred to the customer at some point in time in the future. So, for example, if the customer, might request to enter into the contract because they don't have enough space, right, or because they've got delays in production and they just want to hold off and they don't need the raw materials just yet. So, when we go back to the codification, right, we've got a contract. We know what our obligation is. We have a transaction price. We've allocated the transaction price. But now it comes down to when have we satisfied the performance obligation? Well, generally you would satisfy the performance obligation when the customer obtains control of that product. So that might be that it's delivered to the customer's site, or when the product is shipped. If it's shipped from your dock, it may, the customer now may obtain control of the product, right? So that's going to depend on the delivery and the shipping terms. So we want to look for what are the delivery and shipping terms. And you'll hear these terms used FOB, shipping point, or destination point. Where FOB stands for free on board, right? So basically this is the point, the shipping point is where it is no longer the seller, your organization, no longer has a insurable risk. It's now the risk sits with the customer. If it's destination point, then the risk stays with the seller until it reaches the customer's destination point. So we have to look at these terms. So if we bill and hold, we're going to hold on to it. If once they send it, we have to look and see when has the obligation been satisfied. So we have to look to see when our organization no longer controls the product. Once we no longer have control of the product, then we can recognize revenue, right? So and some of that control can be, it may not necessarily be due to physical possession. So the things that we've got to look for, right, to make sure that the customer has obtained control of the product, all of the following things must exist, right? Because if the customer, even while it's sitting on our dock, if the customer has the ability to direct how the product should be used, they have the ability to direct the use, or obtain substantially all of the remaining benefits of what's sitting on the dock, then the product, even though they haven't taken physical possession of it, they still may have control, right? So we'll look at shipping terms and we'll look at things of control. Do they have control? Do they have the insurable risk? And so there's 4 things that have to exist if they haven't shipped it. So if it hasn't gone to the customer, then there's 4 things that have to exist. First of all, there has to be a reason, and it has to be a substantive reason for the bill and hold arrangement. Right? All four of these things have to be there. The product that's sitting with me, right? So we're still holding it. The product that's sitting has to be separately identified as the customer's. Okay? So those two things. The product has to be ready to transfer right. We can't sit there and do more processing or wrap it. It has to be ready to go for physical transfer immediately. It must be ready for physical transfer. And the last piece, the entity cannot have the ability to use the product or give it to another customer, right? So the seller cannot use or direct to another customer these items, right? So if we haven't shipped it, we still have it. These four things have to be there, right? If these four things aren't there and we haven't shipped it, then we have not met the performance obligation and satisfied requirement, and we cannot recognize revenue. If we've shipped it and it's shipping point, we can. If we've shipped its destination point and finally arrives there, then we can. If we haven't shipped it, then these four things have to be in place in order for us to be able to recognize revenue. So there are all sorts of little interesting things that we have to be aware of. And there's a number of different reasons why organizations enter into bill and hold transactions, and it's perfectly fine. But you can't recognize revenue until you've either gotten rid of it or you have these four things in place. Where you haven't gotten rid of it, these four things are in place where we still retain the materials, but these four things have to be there.